How close are we to actually putting a human on Mars?
It could happen within 10 years, as early as 2033. Just to be clear, 2033, we're talking about a first human expedition to Mars. Within 10 years after that, we can have a permanent human base on Mars. And 10 years after that, we'll probably have children born on Mars.
Robert Zubrin is the visionary who inspired Elon Musk and is fighting to get humans to Mars in our lifetime.
Mars has all the materials on it needed to support life and technological civilization. Mars has continental-sized regions that are 60% water by weight. We're based on carbon, and everything we eat is made of carbon. There's plenty of carbon on Mars. 95% of the Martian atmosphere is carbon dioxide.
What does the settlement on Mars look like?
There'll be an underground network of tunnels, a lot of underground habitation, but with a dome over it, so you'll have a surface component where you can have trees and all that kind of stuff, and an outdoor area.
If Elon Musk gets to Mars, does Elon Musk own Mars?
No, Mars is going to belong to the Martians. The thing that really drives Elon Musk is he wants eternal glory for doing great deeds. He has created SpaceX. It's why he wants to make humanity multiplanetary. And so I don't think there's going to be one Mars colony. There's going to be dozens, started by different groups of people with very different ideas on what the ideal society should be.
Robert, one of the things that we love about doing this podcast is that we get to speak to people who are very passionate about a certain topic. So we want you to help us and also our community that tune into this podcast every single week understand why your passion for Mars and when did this passion begin for you?
It began with Sputnik. I was 5 when Sputnik flew. It's actually the first world event that I can remember in terms of my personal experience of actually happening while I was aware of things. And I was already reading science fiction. And while the adults may have been terrified of Sputnik because it meant the Soviets could hit us, to me as a child, it was just wonderful. Really, I mean, I thought it was great. Because it meant that all these stories I was reading about space travel were going to be true. And I wanted to be part of it. And there was a whole generation of us that were turned on by this. You probably have read the book or seen the movie The October Sky about Homer Hickham's experience. And he was a teenager already, so he went off to launch sizable model rockets. But still, even as a small child, I was totally into it. My parents encouraged my interest, and they got me a telescope, and I did drawings of the moon through the eyepiece, and then we got model rockets, and I launched them, and I read everything I could about space, and it rapidly became clear to me, within a few years anyway, that Mars was really the goal. That Mars was the most interesting planet. It was the planet that could have life on it right now, and it was the planet that really was the best shot for us to settle. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm 9 when Kennedy gives a speech committing us to be on the moon by the end of the decade, and the vision was moon by 1970, Mars by 1980, Saturn by 1990, Alpha Centauri by the year 2000. This is what the future was going to look like, and I wanted to be part of that. So I learned all the science I could and all that. And now, of course, the only part of that program that was actually realized was the moon by 1970. In fact, we made it there by 1969. But then the Nixon administration coming in 69 proceeded to wreck the program. Even as they were welcoming the astronauts back and cheering the glory and the ticker tape parades, they were destroying the program. And NASA's plans, which NASA had plans actually to reach Mars with people by 1981, and they could have done it had they been allowed to proceed. But that was aborted. And really, it's a tremendous historical tragedy. It's kind of like Columbus coming back from the New World the first time, then Ferdinand and Isabella saying, so what? We don't care about this. Get lost. That's kind of what happened.
Help us understand then Why Mars? Out of all the planets, why is Mars the first location for us to go and move to?
Because Mars has all the materials on it needed to support life and technological civilization. If we compare Mars to the moon, which is pretty much the main alternative candidate that people discuss, um, the moon is closer, sure, but the first requirement for life is water. Mars has continental-sized regions that are 60% water by weight. It has glaciers that are pure water ice coming down as far as 38 degrees north, which is the latitude of Athens on Earth or San Francisco.
Wow.
Mars got lots of water. The moon, it's present in parts per million quantities in the soil, except in some permanently shadowed ultra-cold craters near the South Pole. We're carbon-based life forms. Okay, we're based on carbon, and everything we eat is made of carbon, and everything we wear is made of carbon, and everything that we use, even steel, is made with carbon, or through the use of carbon, and plastics, and fabrics, and everything, wood, it's all carbon. There's plenty of carbon on Mars. It's 95% of the Martian atmosphere is carbon dioxide. There's no carbon on the moon. The next most important element for life is nitrogen. It's 3% of Mars's atmosphere. There's no nitrogen on the moon. Okay? And so forth. And these are the fundamentals of life. Now, then in terms of the elements of industry beyond life, they're all present on Mars. About half of them are missing from the moon. And Mars has a 24-hour day, just like Earth, which is what plants want to grow. Moon is 2 weeks of light, 2 weeks of dark. Okay. Mars has had a complex geological history with volcanism and water action, which is necessary to take geochemically rare elements and concentrate them into useful mineral ores. The moon has had none of that. It's all just trash rock. Okay. So you just go on and on about this. And so what you find is that, well, yes, Mars could have had life in the past. It could still have life now because there's liquid underground water on Mars. There's no such thing on the moon, past or present. And in terms of the elements for human survival and prosperity and settlement, they're on Mars. They aren't there on the moon. So basically, the moon is barren. Mars, it's going to take some work, okay, but it has the fundamentals. So the way I see it is that for the coming age of exploration, Mars compares to the moon as North America did to Greenland in the age of European seafaring exploration. That is, Greenland was closer to Europe. Europeans reached it first. But it was really too barren a place to establish a new branch of Western civilization, whereas North America did provide ample scope for that. So for our generation and the next one, Mars is the new world.
Okay, Robert, so how close are we to actually putting a human on Mars?
It's impossible to predict the future. If you ask me when could it happen, okay, it could happen within 10 years. It could happen as early as 2033 if Elon Musk was to go back and focus on leading SpaceX instead of being involved in a multitude of very questionable political activities. If he goes back and doing what he's good at, he could really make this happen because the Starship could well reach orbit this year. It might become operational as a Earth-to-orbit vehicle next year. And if you map this things out, what you see is we could have a major robotic expedition delivered to the surface of Mars with Starships launching in 2028, and then some more in 2031. And by then, we've landed enough stuff in advance, and we've proven the Starship well enough that we could launch a human mission in 2033. Now, that could happen. On the other hand, Musk might continue to be diverted into these other activities, or SpaceX could just have bad luck. It could have a failed launch and be shut down with the thing comes crashing down on Brownsville or something. You know, there is a such thing as luck, both good and bad, and it plays a major role in human affairs, especially space launch. If Musk skates off the edge of the ice, or SpaceX fails for another reason, it's going to take longer. But it's going to happen, because what Musk has done is two things. First of all, he's created some extremely useful space technology. But the more important thing is that he's proven the thesis, which is that it is possible for a well-led entrepreneurial team to do things in space, including very impressive things in space, that it was previously thought that only the governments and superpowers could do. Okay, and not only that, do them in 1/10 the cost and 1/3 the time, and even do things that had been deemed impossible for them to do, like reusable launch vehicles. And so even if SpaceX should fail at this point, that idea has been proven. And as a result, okay, look, right now, there's 5 Chinese companies working to duplicate the Falcon 9, which is the current SpaceX workhorse medium-lift launch vehicle. It mostly reusable. The big first stage is reusable. The smaller upper stage is expended. If Starship is successful, there's going to be a lot of companies working to create their own version of that. And look, because of the Musk's demonstration of the power of entrepreneurial space, you've got a New Zealand company, Rocket Lab, has now reached orbit, and in fact reached orbit over 50 times. And New Zealand doesn't even have a space program worth mentioning. Opening up space to entrepreneurial activity takes you away from who's got the bigger government. It's who's got the better company that can. So it could come from any country.
Robert, you know Elon Musk fairly well. We know him as the guy who started PayPal, and we've watched him grow over the years. Who is Elon Musk?
Well, that's a combination of things. There are some very positive things about Elon Musk, and there's some things about him that are not so positive. The thing that really drives Elon Musk is he wants eternal glory for doing great deeds. Mm. He is a hero in the Homeric sense, or, for instance, Henry V in the Shakespeare's play of that name, who wants to win an Agincourt, but with no one else's help, because he is greedy for glory. Okay. Now, this motivation can have some very positive results. For example, it's why he has created SpaceX. It's why he wants to make humanity multiplanetary. It's why he created Tesla. He wants to be the person who solved the problem of global warming. Okay. He wants to be the person who made humanity multiplanetary. Okay. But for example, those are great things. But this also has a pathological side. As for example, why he became enraged when a group of British divers saved the boys in the cave in Thailand. As you recall, he wanted to be the person who saved the boys in the cave in Thailand with a miniature submarine he was going to bring into the cave. And the British divers beat him to it. And he became angry at them. He didn't say, well done, congratulations, hats off. No, he said, you're a bunch of pedophiles. I hate you. Okay. So this motive that he has, okay, I can't hold him too much to fault for this, in the sense that, I didn't do anything to save the boys in the cave in Thailand. So he, for whatever motive, he was going to try. But there is a dark side to his personality. And I don't want to get into politics here, but some of the politics he's into is pretty dark. And but nevertheless, on the whole, having done what he's done for space, he has made a contribution of inestimable value for the human future.
If Elon Musk gets to Mars in 2030 or 2033 or whenever it's going to be, does Elon Musk own Mars? Like, how does that work? Like, what?
Yeah.
Now, Mars is going to belong to the Martians. Okay. And look, I mean, this is how this is going to play out. All right. Let's assume that Elon Musk does land a human crew on Mars in 2033, well ahead of anyone else. Okay. Well, first of all, Starship is working. Other people are going to copy it. Maybe not exactly. They'll have their own take on it, their own version, bigger ones, smaller ones, ones with wings, whatever. Okay. The basic idea is there's going to be lots of these things. And of course, there's a lot that vehicles of this type can do besides going to Mars. Okay. A vehicle of this type could travel from Los Angeles to Sydney in less than an hour.
Wow.
Wow. So I think there's going to be starships used for intercontinental travel, anywhere to anywhere on Earth in less than an hour, actually. So there's going to be lots of these things. Now, Musk told me once that he could build the Starship, that is the upper stage, the part that would actually go to Mars, for $10 million each, which means that either he or one of these other people that are going to be building these things would probably be willing to sell them for $20 million each. Now, think about this. If you have reusable launch vehicles, after a while, you're going to have something else that we have never seen or even thought much about before, which is used launch vehicles. Okay, think about that. Okay, there's lots of people driving cars on Earth today. In fact, I would say the majority of people who are driving cars on Earth today cannot afford a new car. How is it that they own cars? They buy used cars. And you can get a perfectly functional used car, in many cases, for 1/10 the cost of a new car of the same type. So if these things are selling new for $20 million, at some point they're going to become available for $2 million.
Yeah.
And, these things are supposed to be able to take 100 people from Earth to Mars. You divide 2 million by 100 people, that's $20,000 each. Now, that's a lot for an airplane ticket.
Yeah.
Okay, I've never paid that much for an airplane ticket, and I hope I never will. But compared to what people paid to emigrate to, say, America or Australia in the 1800s, as a fraction of income, that is cheaper. Okay? That is cheaper than the kind of money it costs to travel across the sea in the 17 or 1800s to start a new life on a new continent. And so people will be able to do it. And so I don't think there's going to be one Mars colony. There's going to be dozens, started by different groups of people with very different ideas on what the ideal society should be. Okay? So, if you have concerns about Musk's politics, and I do, you shouldn't be concerned that therefore that is how Mars is going to be run. Musk might start his own colony on Mars, absolutely. But Mars has a surface area equal to all the continents of the Earth put together. Okay? So there's room on Mars for hundreds of colonies started by different people. Now, here's the thing about Mars colonies, a couple things to mention. Okay? Which ones are going to grow to be the biggest? The ones that are most attractive to immigrants. Okay? So people will go to, for instance, to free societies, not to tyrannical societies. Okay? These are the ones that are going to attract the immigrants. There's a reason why the United States has an illegal immigration problem and North Korea does not. Okay? No one wants to go there. Okay? You could say it's an immigration problem. I actually don't think that way. I think that America has been built by the fact that it's been a tremendous attractor for immigrants. And I think Australia the same way. It's just a little farther away, so it's taken longer to grow. But still, this is what have allowed our countries to grow to be potent and creative societies. So I think, for instance, that the common science fiction plot of the extraterrestrial tyranny is not realistic, because no one would want to immigrate to one. I mean, it makes for a great story. If you have extraterrestrial tyrannies, you can have your brave revolutionaries fighting to overthrow it, and you're off to the races in terms of your storyline. And I like movies like that, but that's not how it's going to be. The successful Mars societies will be free societies, okay? And they also won't be garbage dumps like in the whatever it's called, Total Recall, because few people will want to go there, and especially women won't want to go there, which means that the population won't grow. And so, no, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And so these are going to be societies that are attractive socially and attractive aesthetically, and in many other ways. And furthermore, they have to be free if they're going to have the creativity needed to take on the mushroom frontier in terms of developing the technologies needed to deal with it. And by the way, that impulse of free, technologically adept people confronting the challenge of the frontier has been a source of enormous amounts of innovation here on Earth. It's one reason why America has been an extremely inventive culture, and technologically, even from colonial times, and those inventions, that we made here, from steamboats and telegraphs to electric light bulbs and recorded sound, motion pictures, and airplanes and whatever, these have advanced the life of people everywhere. And inventions made to master the challenge of the Martian frontier are going to make life on Earth much better. That's, in fact, one of the main benefits we're going to get from going to Mars, creating additional creative branches of human society that will add their inventions to the overall progress of humanity as a whole. The other thing, though, is in order for these Martian societies to prosper, at one point or another, whether they're started by nation states or corporations or non-governmental organizations or religious sects or you name it, the Martian cities are going to want to become independent so that they can govern themselves in their own interests instead of in the interests of investors or whomever back home. Okay, this is what we've seen on Earth wherever, for instance, Europeans went and colonized. Eventually, these places all become independent. If you're concerned about Musk and his politics and say, oh my God, the Martian colony is going to be a tyranny, well, who was Columbus working for? Inquisition Spain. Okay? Inquisition Spain was the power that first opened up the New World to Europeans, but it did not stay the province of Inquisition Spain.
Robert, paint us a picture. What does the settlement on Mars look like? Is it similar to what we see in the movies? You know, like the Hollywood film The Martian had an astronaut stuck there and he couldn't really go outside.
Well,
what does it look like?
The Martian was not about a city on Mars. It was about a first expedition to Mars. The Martian's somewhat realistic in terms of a first expedition to Mars. Okay. But if we're talking about a Martian city, initially it might just look like a bunch of spacecraft landed on the surface and linked together. But once it has the capacity to actually do construction on Mars and build itself according to a rational plan, I see the following. There'll be an underground network of tunnels, a lot of underground habitation, but with a dome over it, so you'll have a surface component where you can have trees and all that kind of stuff, and an outdoor area, and even perhaps a lake. Now, these domes will not be miles across. From an engineering point of view, you can't do that for reasons. The pressure, if you've got a pressure difference between the inside and outside of a dome, the bigger it is, the thicker it has to be. But we can have 100-meter domes. So if you can think of a network of 100-meter domes that are transparent, okay, so sunlight can come down into them, and you can have outdoor areas and even parts of houses that are above ground. but then most of the living quarters in the house will be below ground. And the reason is there's a certain amount of radiation on Mars from cosmic sources. Now, I don't want to overdraw it because, in fact, the level of the radiation is about the same as that at the International Space Station. And people do missions to the space station and they don't die of the radiation. No, we've had no radiological casualties on the space station at all. But the people stay in the space station only for 6 months. There's been someone stayed for a year. They don't stay there for their whole lives. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to limit the dose. Now, ask yourself, how much of your day do you actually spend outside?
Not much, yeah.
2 hours a day outside?
Probably, yeah. Yep.
Say, let's call it 2.5 hours, 10% of your day.
Mm.
Okay, the rest is spent inside. Now, there are some people like farmers and so forth who spend a larger fraction, but even then, they probably don't spend more than a third of their time, 8 hours outside. Okay, so if you think about the life of a Martian in one of these cities, by Martian, I mean a person living on Mars. Okay, the indoor time is spent underground. That's where they're sleeping and that's where they're doing their office work and stuff like this. They're completely shielded from radiation. Okay, and it's only when they're on the surface. So if you spend 1/10 of your time on the surface, you'll be getting a radiation dose 1/10 of that, what the astronauts are getting at the space station. And in fact, that would be low enough to be within current regulatory limits for nuclear power workers in the United States. So, which are very conservative. They're designed to keep nuclear power workers far, far away from any doses that might endanger them. So that's how it will be. Now, in addition to being shielded by soil, you can be shielded by water. So one idea that people have discussed is if you have a lake inside the dome, say 10 meters deep, okay, that can be your fish farm and your habitat is under that. And of course, the water is transparent, so you can be looking up and you can have light coming in, natural sunlight coming down to you through the water tank, and your habitations are below that. So it doesn't have to be all artificial lighting. You could have that kind of thing. Put an aquarium above you. That's fine shielding. And it can have, of course, a very useful application in terms of.
Okay, so Robert, take me through. It's 2033 or 2034. Do I get to log on to an app and book a ticket to Mars, and then I turn up to the space station? I get on the flight, I guess, and then how long does that take to get to Mars? When I arrive, what do I do? Take me through that journey.
First of all, just to be clear, 2033, we're talking about a first human expedition to Mars. Okay. But within 10 years after that, on the optimistic schedule, we can have a permanent human base on Mars, 30, 40, 50 people. And 10 years after that, we'll probably have children born on Mars, starting to grow up on Mars. And at that point, your scientific base is transitioning into a settlement. And at that point, also, there's plenty of used starships all over the place on Earth, and different groups who might want to start their own settlement have the technical ability to do it. But if you're asking the question of how long it takes to travel from Earth to Mars using a technology like a Starship, it's 6 months, which is pretty much the same amount of time as it took to sail from England to Australia in the 1800s.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're not used to taking voyages of that length, but certainly in the not too distant past, people did that. People are certainly capable of doing it. 6 months in space is the typical rotation on the space station. Now, someday we'll have much faster spaceships.
And then how many people will be on those ships?
Well, the Starship advertises itself as being big enough for 100. Okay. So now, how this is probably going to go, is 100 person on a ship is actually pretty small. Even an airline typically has more than that, and obviously a cruise ship or passenger ship much more than that. But But that was about the size of the ships that many people took traveling to America or Australia a century or two ago. My grandparents on my mother's side came over from Europe. And so if you're of my generation and you have ancestors who you spoke to who actually came over on ships rather than airplanes, some of the stories they tell as to what it was like, it seems sort of incredible. We'd be in this cramped little ship and in the hold and, eating orange peels that are thrown down to you from the first class passengers up there. But anyway, whereas we just cross the ocean now in, 6 hours, you can fly from the East Coast to the U.S. to Europe, et cetera. So similarly, I think that while the first people who immigrate to Mars will travel in relatively small ships that take 6 months, their grandchildren will listen to those stories with wonder because they will do it in comfort in much larger ships driven by fusion power that will do the passage in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
And fully equipped with, restaurants and a pool table and a pub and everything, to make it
Comfortable. Yeah.
a easy passage.
Mm.
So it's not going to be quite like airliners, which can get you somewhere in 6 hours or 12 hours or even to Australia in 18 hours from the West Coast. But it'd be more like the transition we had in America of going from wagon trains to the transcontinental railroad, where instead of it being a 3-month trip across the nation in which you had a serious chance of dying along the way, you would do it in 2 days riding on a train with a restaurant car. So I think that'll happen.
Robert, you mentioned earlier that NASA had the opportunity to get a human to Mars and they didn't do it. Can you explain why?
We had a failure in political leadership in the United States of extraordinary dimensions. As I mentioned, it's as if Ferdinand and Isabella had reacted to Columbus's report from his initial voyage with, we don't care about this. Go away. Get lost, Chris. It's really incredible. And then you see that failure of leadership was then repeated in one way or another for the next generation. Or you might say that we actually got to the moon because we had exceptional political leadership in the 1960s, because really the people that got us to the moon in the 1960s were the same people or the younger brothers of the people who won World War II. You compare John F. Kennedy to Trump, okay, or Charles de Gaulle to Macron, okay, or Winston Churchill, who's a little bit earlier, to the fellow who's prime minister now. I mean, there's been the quality of political leadership has greatly deteriorated, and so long as this therefore was the province of political leaders, and by political leaders I don't just mean particular individuals, I mean political establishments. In other words, the United States, and this frankly has been one of the great disappointments in my life, because I was born in 1952. My father served in the war. So did all my uncles. So did every adult male of my acquaintance when I was a child, without exception. And they'd come back and they'd say, look, we won. Not only did we win the war, we won the peace. We gave Germany and Japan governments that were much better than anything they had ever made for themselves. And here it is, and the world's at peace. And so they did this. And then in the 50s, they built the interstate highway system, and then Atoms for Peace, and then Apollo to the moon. And these were great projects that government was capable of doing. Okay. And, so I fully expected, growing up as a boy and then as a teenager in the 60s, I saw this is the kind of thing that government is capable of doing. It's capable of doing these grand projects. And then it became impotent. And I was not an early convert to the idea of entrepreneurial space. Okay. That is when the government stopped being effective at space exploration or human space exploration in the 70s and the 80s, I was expecting, okay, look, we've got a problem right now, but the next election we'll get somebody in there and we're going to get this right and we'll be back on track. And it never happened. Okay? Never happened. As this pattern continued, then people started looking for another form of leadership. And so people started doing entrepreneurial space or putting their bets on entrepreneurial space in the 80s. And it took a while before it happened because initial ventures were undercapitalized, et cetera, et cetera. But finally, in 2001, okay, Musk was converted, and I did have a role in that. Musk read my book, The Case for Mars, and he came to a Mars Society event in the Bay Area in 2001, and I talked to him for several hours. And I was among the people that helped convince Musk to make Mars his calling. Not the only person, but I definitely played a role. The idea, Victor Hugo said, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. So the idea of making humans interplanetary was an idea that first managed to move Kennedy to do Apollo, but that was too fragile a foundation for taking humanity interplanetary in the long run. But it continued to win people over, and in various forms. I mean, Star Trek presents a vision of a human future where we're out there, and it's a positive vision. It's in sharp contrast to these negative visions of a future of limited resources and, when everybody is being recycled like Soylent Green and all this. Okay, no, this is the positive, the open future, and people have been converted to it. And eventually, the people that were converted to it included people with serious resources, serious business and political talent, people who could lead successful, large-scale entrepreneurial efforts. And I'm naming Musk here in particular, but also Bezos and Peter Beck a little bit later. But still, as the idea rallies the forces to its banner for its own realization, and that's what we're seeing.
Do you think the government organizations, they have too much red tape? So the entrepreneurial mindset, the ability to be able to test and fail, that's why they're able to get there a lot quicker than, say, a government organization that has all of those kind of old school ways of thinking?
Yes, precisely.
You're a nuclear engineer. How does that tie in with space travel? Can you explain that to us?
Well, I'm both a nuclear and aerospace engineer. I have advanced degrees in both of those areas. My doctorate is in nuclear engineering. I thought I was going to go into fusion power research. But I also know about the fission reactors. But I have a master's in aeronautics and astronautics. And I got hired by Martin Marietta, which was a big company that became a bigger company called Lockheed Martin, to do preliminary design of interplanetary missions, because for preliminary design, you want someone with a broad interdisciplinary background, because there's a lot of different variables that you got to bring together. And I was good at that. And but nuclear energy certainly has a role in Mars settlement. I mean, look, you don't have fossil fuels on Mars. Solar energy is weak. The wind is weak. You're going to have to use nuclear power. Okay, so that was one reason why Martin was interested in me. But actually, most of my career has not been nuclear. It's been straight aerospace engineering.
If nuclear power is needed on Mars, is it dangerous to get it there? Like, how does that work?
No, actually, it's not. Because a nuclear reactor is not really very radioactive until after it's been turned on. See, while it's just made of say, uranium, okay, uranium is uh, radioactive, but very weakly so. It has a half-life of like 4 billion years. And you see, the longer the half-life, the longer it lasts. But it lasts longer because it's not doing very much. Okay? And, people used to make uh, plates with uranium glaze. They were called Fiesta ware. They were quite popular. Nice red color was a brand. Nobody died from that. So the uranium is I mean, you don't want to eat it, okay? The radiation from uranium cannot go through a piece of paper. That's how light the shielding needs to be. And all of that uranium is coming from the earth. So even if you had a crash and the uranium came back down and landed in the sea, you're just taking uranium that you mined somewhere and landing it somewhere else. Now, after you turn a reactor on, you start generating radioactive wastes that have short half-life, ranging from, seconds and days to, 30 years for strontium and cesium. So those things, they're putting out a lot of radioactivity. But you're not turning this reactor on until it's on the ground, on Mars, put in place like in a crater or something.
Robert, you have dedicated your life to Mars. So will you be on one of the first voyages? And if so, how will that feel for you to land on Mars?
I kind of doubt that I'm going to get a chance to go to Mars because I'm actually 73 right now.
Right.
And I'm pretty spry now, but 10 years from now, I'll be 83. And I'm not really that promising a candidate at age 83 for a first explorer to go to Mars. Okay. But actually, if you want to know, so yeah, if they give me a chance to go, I'll do it. But that's not what I'm in this for. I'm not in this for the experience of personally going to Mars. I'm in this because I believe that it's important for a positive human future, that we have an open future. Okay. I think it's important for the future itself. And it's also important for the present because how we conceive of the future affects what's going to happen well before that future. And what I mean by that is, look, what's the biggest threat facing humanity today? I think it's not global warming, although I think global warming is real. Global warming is a technical problem, can be solved with, nuclear power, actually. But the major threat facing humanity right now is bad ideas. And in particular, one bad idea, the very same bad idea that caused the great disasters of the 20th century, which is that there isn't enough for everybody. Okay? That there's only so much here. And so we have to knock them out of the box, or we have to knock them out of the box because they're coming to knock us out of the box. And this idea of limited resources, look, 1914, Europe was more prosperous than it ever had been before in human history. Okay, ever, by far, and yet it tore itself to pieces. And over this idea that, especially, the fundamental, 1912, Friedrich von Bernharding, chief intellectual of the German General Staff, wrote a book called Germany and the Next War, in which he said, look, war is inevitable. Here's Eurasia. Who's going to get it? It's either going to be us Germans or the Russians. Okay. And if we're going to have to fight them sooner or later, let's make it sooner because they haven't industrialized yet. And the same thing with Japan and China. Okay, Japan felt it had to conquer China in the 1930s because we got to take them down while they're still disorganized. Because if we're going to have to fight them sooner or later, if you think you're going to have to fight someone sooner or later, by definition, it's going to be better for one side or the other to make it sooner rather than later. That's how this goes. And I happen to know, because I have spoken to them personally, that there are people in senior positions in the American national security establishment who believe that war with China is inevitable. Why? Because there's 1.3 billion of them. And if they all start driving cars like Americans or even Europeans, there's not going to be enough oil in the world. And you can bet your bottom dollar that there are people just like them in Beijing who look at this issue from the other side of the chessboard and say, war with the Americans is inevitable. Okay. And if this is the kind of thinking that we have, there's going to be war. But it's untrue. It's untrue. Okay. Because you see, resources are not finite. People create resources. This is why, as the population of the world has gone up, the standard of living has actually gone up, not down. It's exactly the opposite of what Malthus predicted. Exactly the opposite. Because the more people, the more inventors. The more inventors, the more inventions, and inventions are cumulative. Okay, but people don't see that. They see, look, here's the world. It looks like it's finite, and there's can only be so much here. And if you try to explain what I just explained to you about the infinite nature of resources on Earth, it just doesn't seem credible, even though it's proven by history. Okay, it's like trying to explain to a person who doesn't know mathematics that a 1 centimeter long line segment can have an infinite number of points in it. Doesn't seem believable. But anybody can believe that a line that stretches off infinitely in both directions has an infinite number of points in it. And so if we make people understand that the future is open, that by relying on our better side of our natures, we can open up planets so there's no reason to kill each other fighting over provinces.
So from what you're saying there, if we don't get to Mars at some point in the next 10, 20 years, what do you see happening here on Earth?
Well, I think, look, we're in a serious situation right now. Okay, look, there's additional sides to this. Okay, because you talk about the threat of war, which is very real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is very, very real. Now, what makes it the most real? Things that makes it the most real is there's actually people who need war, who want war, or want people to believe that war is inevitable. Okay, and these are basically tyrants. Okay, because tyrants, the putative justification for tyrannies is that we're under threat. Okay, so we can't tolerate dissent. Everybody's got to get in line. And this is very much the case, for example, in Russia, where is, the doctrine of silnaya ruka, the strong arm. We have to be united. And Stalin is a hero to this day in Russia, even though he probably killed more Russians even than Hitler did, okay, to maintain his tyranny. But they said, he made us strong, okay? And Putin needs Russians to believe that the West is a threat to them and they have to be prepared for war with the West. He has to maintain a condition of hostility, because if he doesn't, there's no justification for his tyranny. Okay, but then where do you get the idea that war is inevitable? From the idea that resources are limited. Okay, Hitler actually said this. He said, the way he put it was, the idea of perpetual prosperity through science is a Jewish plot to undermine the people's belief in the necessity for war. Now, it's not a Jewish plot, but it does undermine people's belief in the necessity for war, which is a good thing, but is not something that someone like Hitler or Stalin or Putin wants. They want people to believe in this. They need people to believe in the necessity for war. So we need to undermine that belief. And the way we can undermine that belief is by opening the space frontier.
Robert, I saw a video of you explaining that on Mars there are craters that are filled with ice, and that if we were to get there and then melt the ice underneath, that would have benefit. We could swim in that water, but we'd leave like a roof on that ice. Is that right? So can you explain that and I guess how
what
on Earth
you would have if you have a crater that's filled with ice, and then you take a nuclear reactor, which has got lots of waste heat beyond the electricity that it makes, you can melt the water under the ice. So now you have an ice-covered lake. Okay. Now, this is a very common phenomenon here in North America during the wintertime. You get lakes and ponds all over the place that freeze over on top, and people go ice skating. Underneath, though, it's liquid water, and the fish are still swimming around. And people go ice fishing by cutting holes in the ice and dropping a fishing line in. That's a very common sport here in the wintertime. Not as cold in Australia, I guess. You don't have that, but this is a common phenomenon. And, of course, in Antarctica, there are lakes that are permanently ice-covered. So if you melt the water under the ice, the top stays ice because it's exposed to the cold Martian air. The bottom is warmed by the waste heat from the reactor. And so now what you've actually done is you have terraformed a crater. That is, you've turned it into an ice-covered lake. And plants can even grow in it because the sunlight can come down through the ice. And you can have fish, you can have everything. And then you could have underwater habitats, similar to the ones that Jacques Cousteau used to have. And people could live in these and you have a hatch in the bottom and you go out through the bottom because, you take a cup and you turn it like this and it gets a pocket of air up here and then you can just go in and out the bottom of the cup. And you travel around your lake in scuba gear. You wouldn't need a spacesuit.
Do you believe there are extraterrestrial life forms that exist? Do you think we'll see that when somebody gets to Mars?
Okay. I absolutely believe there's extraterrestrial life forms. Okay. And really, the proof of that is that life appears on Earth virtually as soon as it could. That is, as soon as the Earth cooled down enough to have liquid water, we find evidence of microbial life on Earth. And that means one of two things. Either the processes that lead to the creation of life from chemistry are highly probable and occur spontaneously wherever you have an appropriate environment with rocks and minerals and liquid water. Okay, so you have rapid development from chemistry into life. Okay, that's one way that life could have appeared on Earth. And the other is that there are spores of bacteria or something floating around in space. And so as soon as the Earth became habitable, they land and take off. So, and either way, it means life is everywhere. In other words, either life forms spontaneously quickly or life is seeds of life are floating around in the cosmos. Either way, it means life is everywhere.
Yeah.
And then the whole history of life on Earth is one of development from simpler forms to more complex forms manifesting greater capacities for activity and intelligence and ever more rapid evolution, in fact, because speed of evolution is adaptive. So I think life is common. Now, if you're asking me, do I think that there, are intelligent extraterrestrials on Mars? No, I don't think that at all. I think that there's probably microbial life on Mars. And if we find it, and I believe we will, in the Martian groundwater, there's going to be two possible answers. One is it's the same as Earth microbial life, in which case that is support for the hypothesis that the seeds of life are just landing on planets wherever they find a habitable place to grow. On the other hand, if it's different, that would support the idea of separate origins on the planets.
Robert, do you believe science fiction helps shape the innovation that I guess you have for this expedition, Elon has, and how true are some of those movies that we all see, like Passenger and The Martian?
Well, science fiction absolutely has had an influence in shaping our vision of the future and what we try to do. And well, I myself was certainly recruited, as it were, to try to help create the spacefaring future by writers like Arthur Clarke and Robert Heinlein, who basically painted this picture. And so writers are able to see with their minds things that people have yet to see with their eyes. But then they can make it visible to us through works, including novels, movies, painting this vision of the spacefaring future, have been very influential. They've been they are the root of this.
Robert, we like to wrap up our episodes with our guests with them sharing something that is important to them. It can be an item or a story. Is there something that you want to share with our community today?
This is probably my most important book. It's called The Case for Mars. First edition was published in 1996, and it's gone through several updated editions. It's still in print. This is the 2021 edition, and there's a little endorsement here, Elon Musk, worth reading. This is the book that converted Musk, that made him decide to make space his calling. So this book, I'm very proud of it, and people can get it on Amazon. And then this is my most recent book. It's called The New World on Mars: What We Can Create on the Red Planet. Okay, and so The Case for Mars is really about how we can go to Mars. It's primarily devoted to explaining the plan, the technology, etc. of primarily, the first 2/3 of the book are about the first human expedition to Mars, how we can make it, do it in our time. And then the final third does go through building the base on Mars, colonizing Mars, and even terraforming Mars.
Look, Robert, we have a community filled with curious people, and if someone has been watching or listening to this episode with you today and they've made it this far into the episode, they've loved every single word of what you've had to say, is there something that you want to say to that viewer or listener right now?
Well, sure. For instance, if your viewers are mostly in Australia, join the Mars Society Australia. If you go to the Mars Society website, which is at marssociety.org, there's a place where there's a tab you click on chapters. You can go down to Australia. We have an active Mars Society Australia. And in combination with our friends in India, the Mars Society Australia has partnered to build a Mars practice exploration station in the Himalayas. It's called the Himalayan Outpost for Planetary Exploration, HOPE. It's the HOPE station. And people can get involved in this. Otherwise, pick up a copy of The Case for Mars.
Thank you so much, Robert. We really appreciate you joining us.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.